Coming up on this edition of the First Down Line podcast, episode 2, we're going to have Brett A. Summers join us. He wrote a couple of articles last few weeks, including one regarding helmet cams and the use in college football. Now, it's being used in football in period, but with spring games and all of that going on right now, definitely prominent in the world of college football. Is that something that's cool as a fan? We want you to let us know, and we'll hear from Brett and what he thinks. Also, Sean Barnes stops by. He wrote an article. The draft is coming up this week, and he discusses the use of force plates to evaluate draftees by 2 NFL franchises. Those are some of the stories that those guys will join us for. We also want your opinion as we bring out the sticks. It's all coming up. First Down Line podcast starts now.
If I can have your attention, if I don't have your attention, let me get your attention. Ladies and gentlemen.
The FirstDownLine.com podcast.
The FirstDownLine.com podcast.
Looks like they're going to measure here. Do you think they got the first down?
Now remember that the first down line is not official.
You're official enough. Download for the latest in sports and technology.
Download it.
Welcome into this edition of the First Down Line podcast. I am Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us. And wow, finally made our debut a couple of weeks back. It was a lot of fun. If you did miss our initial edition of the podcast, we invite you to check it out at FirstDownLine.com. We definitely want to get your feedback. This whole website is designed about trying to make sure that you get the latest in sports and technology. And so as a result, we definitely want your feedback. So head to FirstDownLine.com. You can let us know what you think. You can email us. FirstDownLine email is FDL@FirstDownLine.com. So definitely check that out. You can also send us tweets at FirstDownLine. So be sure to do that when you have a chance as well. That is FirstDownLine on Twitter. You can check out the latest of what's happening in the world of sports and technology. So let's go ahead and talk about our Bring Out the Sticks. We definitely want you to let us know. Right now, we're going to debate the use of wearable tech devices. This is the Fitbit Force. It's actually something that I used for a little while. I haven't fallen in love with it, so I decided to send it back. Now, I've been looking for one that's not really out yet, it seems. I haven't been able to find one that combines heart rate monitor and the silent alarm feature that wakes you up gradually, as well as being able to, track calories burned, movements, things like that. So until I do, and maybe that's the iWatch that's coming out later, reportedly, rumored to be coming out, probably better said, those kind of things. Haven't put one back on my wrist, so figure out which one I want to use. There was the Polar heart rate monitors that are out. I don't know if those are the right ones for me because I don't know if they measure sleep and some of those things as well. So let us know, though, at FirstDownLine on Twitter or FDL@FirstDownLine.com. Let us know, is that something that you use? Because we want you to bring out the sticks and get involved with the podcast. We'll share any of those answers that we do receive coming up in the next couple of weeks. So, First Down Line podcast, episode 2. I told you we'll get to that story, helmet cams and their use in college football, in just a little bit, but something that I thought was really interesting is there's a company out there called Remarkable Technologies, and Remarkable talked about different things that hit the market that people should be aware of, and one of the things they talked about was a wireless audio distribution system, which I thought was really cool. Basically, you're at a sports bar, right? And you want to watch your team. So, for example, I'm rocking the Oregon Ducks jersey as they had their spring game earlier this weekend, and it was something where if I'm at the sports bar and I want to watch, say, Oregon on that TV, and they're playing, maybe I'm out in the East Coast, which has happened before. One time, Oregon was playing Michigan at Autzen Stadium. We were out in Florida, and we had to try to find a way to watch the game. Now, this was like 2003, so the packages, the things that are available on TV, whole different world than they are nowadays. We actually did find a place, despite the one bar that we checked out first showing Central Florida and someone else. But the point is, let's say we're in Florida, and this is the game, the game that's being shown on that TV is Central Florida. There's a company out there that made a wireless audio distribution system that configures with your iPhone, and it is really, really cool. I'll show you the app a little bit later on because we're going to do our downloads as we've done, but there's a company that basically sets up these bars, these sports bars, to handle at least their base model, 10 cable boxes, and I think like 60 devices. It's called CINet. And on your iPhone, you can use just a simple up and down arrow interface to be able to listen to the game that you want to hear. Now, I'm a broadcaster, and so I have a soft spot for wanting to hear broadcasters do the games. In fact, I think that it's something that is very useful to broadcast, so I'm happy that they still have commentators. I want to hear my guy, do the game. If it's a radio broadcast, even better, but if it's just the TV guys doing it, I want to be able to listen in instead of having to tune into Central Florida. Well, just again, up and down arrows, it'll tell you which channel you're searching for, and then you can adjust the volume using your headphones right on your smartphone, which I thought was a really cool deal. So we'll show you the interface for that coming up a little bit later in our download section. In fact, if you have a download that you want to share with us, we'd love to see it. Just head over to FirstDownline.com, FDL at FirstDownline.com to email us, or you can also get a hold of us on Twitter. That's twitter.com/FirstDownline. Let's go ahead and check in with Brett A. Summers. He is someone who contributes to our website. He had 2 articles this last week, including one that talked about helmet cams. And is this something that's cool for fans? Let's get his 2 cents on what that story was all about.
I think the thing that drew me in to write about the helmet cam technology is similar in a lot of ways to, part of why I'm trying to write for First Down Line. And there's a lot of variety to do with sports, and even though technology in sports is kind of a niche thing, it's still really spread out and easy to come up with ideas from a lot of different angles. And the helmet camera technology is really interesting to me, not only because football is my favorite sport, but because it can really give fans as well as coaches, as you might read in my story, a very different viewpoint from the eyes of the athlete. A lot of these helmet cams are being used for the quarterback position, which is well understood. Coaches want to know if their quarterbacks are looking the defensive backs off, if they're finding their right reads, if they're hitting their reads in the proper progression. And just from a fan's perspective, to see what the guy you're cheering for sees and what he's doing out on the field. And it's just a really cool perspective. And, with the quality of video that's coming out of these things as technology grows, it's really impressive, some of the things that you can see. The shut leader and helmet design, so to speak, is actually made their shut vision camera, which if you see a photograph, it looks really cool. I mean, if you weren't looking directly at the helmet, center right above where the face mask basically is bolted to the helmet, you wouldn't even realize that the camera was there. So, it'll be interesting to see, as teams right now are just sort of getting their feet wet with this technology. It'll be really cool to see how much really comes out of it. My story, I touch on the Rutgers football program actually saying that this could help them determine a starter for their team this fall as they enter the Big Ten conference for their first year. And if you're not sure who your quarterback's going to be, can you pin it to, watching video of what they see? It's a pretty interesting question. For First Down Line, I'm Brett A. Summers. Find me on Twitter at BA Sportswriter.
Thanks, Brett, and you can read that article right now at FirstDownline.com. I think it's a really neat perspective to be able to see what people are looking at, how the quarterback reacts. I liked in the article how he talked about a lot of the advantages of being able to see what the quarterback's seeing, but also he talked about at Oregon State, Ryan Murphy had a chance to wear a helmet cam. It wasn't the shut vision that was discussed in the majority of the piece and a lot of the programs are using, but still, now you have the safety being able to see his perspective, and then you have a safety too who's in the rear of the defense, so you can see the guys moving ahead of him too from an interesting perspective. So they've been using end zone overhead cams for a really long time, but I thought the helmet cam piece by Brett A. Summers was pretty cool. If you did not have a chance to check that out, we invite you to visit FirstDownline.com. Continuing the podcast, episode 2. Again, you can check out our debut podcast also at FirstDownline.com. Go ahead and let us know your thoughts too. Twitter.com/FirstDownLine. The NFL schedule came out, and I was curious how the world of technology has made the football schedule release, the NFL schedule release, which was something that I just absolutely craved. When that day would arrive, I'd run out or get onto the website. They would just put up the schedule there for a printable version, and then from there I'd start highlighting the Broncos' schedule so I could know exactly what to expect for the 2000 and whatever season. And now with the NFL draft being backed up a couple of weeks this year just because of a Radio City Music Hall scheduling conflict, the NFL schedule was still released about the same time. And on the 24th of April, I want to discuss the balance of the NFL schedule with technology because I thought it was interesting. The NFL Network had a kickoff show, I guess a schedule release party kind of show. And Rich Eisen, right off the bat, host of NFL Network's Total Access, Rich Eisen podcast, he immediately was saying, we want you to go to whatever website, and we want you to download this and start getting back to us. What do you think? Use the hashtag NFL schedule. And that's a complete counter methodology than what, say, the NCAA tournament uses. They, CBS, makes you sit there and have to wait and watch, and instead, by releasing the schedule ahead of time, as soon as they signed on for that show, not only were people able to talk about it, but the show was able to bring in reactions from people and not just personnel inside the NFL. So I thought that was a pretty cool deal. You can read more about that over at FirstDownLine.com. One of the things, too, when it comes to technology is Levi's Stadium's the new stadium for the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners will open up play there with the Chicago Bears, which was something we learned when the NFL schedule was released, and I thought that was pretty cool to know that this very technologically advanced stadium was going to have that matchup for their first ever pairing, and you can read more about that at FirstDownLine.com. Love the release of the NFL schedule. Can't wait for the draft, too, because last year I was at Radio City Music Hall for the first round of the NFL draft, and then I was out watching baseball on Friday and Saturday. It was one of the rare instances where I missed the NFL draft, and so when I was a kid, I would use Yahoo chat rooms, and I would start typing out the selections, just like ESPN would put out on their bottom line or whatever, where it would be current selection, and then the player and the team that was picking them, and I'd recap the last 5 picks. I was an absolute nerd, and that's okay. We're moving on. Podcast episode 2, speaking of the NFL, they are using something called force plate technology. And this graph is part of a video that you can see at FirstDownLine.com thanks to one of the companies that is really pioneering this technology. Sean Barnes had a chance to write about the NFL using this as a way to evaluate draftees, and specifically 2 NFL franchises, the Falcons and the Jaguars, have the NFC and AFC rights respectively, the exclusive rights to use this technology, and it's part of the piece that Sean Barnes wrote about, and he joins us now to recap that story.
Last week, NBCSports.com reported that the Atlanta Falcons have developed a partnership with Sparta Sports Science during this offseason. Since it's time for the draft, most of the focus has been on the use of their force plate assessment protocol on South Carolina's defensive end, Jadeveon Clowney. But this partnership is going to be even more important as the season gets going. Sparta's system uses a force plate and a series of vertical jump tests. With this, they can measure what they call a player's movement signature. In most of the literature, this is usually called dynamic stability, and in short, it analyzes an athlete's athletic ability and control through the loading, deceleration, and acceleration phases of a vertical jump. These control patterns give an insight to an athlete's true ability, which will translate to their performance on the field in more skill-based activities. But even more importantly, it will give trainers valuable information regarding the player's imbalances and weaknesses. This is where the long-term benefit of the partnership is going to play out, by keeping their players healthy. It will give trainers a leg up when it comes to training their rosters in terms of injury prevention. As we saw with the Falcons last season, this is a big deal. Early in 2013, we watched them drop player after player to the injury reserve. Roddy White, Julio Jones, running back Steven Jackson, and left tackle Sam Baker, just to name a few. Atlanta went from 13-3 the previous year to winning just 2 of their first 10 games in 2013. Now, don't get me wrong, sports medicine and NFL teams have been very aware of the importance of focused training with the goal of injury prevention. But with Sparta, they claim to have a system that can scientifically pinpoint these weaknesses and put more focus in fixing those to keep injuries away. If it works, it could be a more successful way of designing workouts and it could be more efficient, saving a lot of evaluation time between individual players and the training staff. We'll have to wait to see how this plays out and how successful the Falcons and Sparta are at keeping their starters on the field for the duration of the season. For First Down Line, I'm Sean Barnes.
Thank you, Sean. From the NFL and the NFL draft to NASCAR. This is one of the only pieces so far that we've discussed the sport of NASCAR, and it involves trying to control Mother Nature. A couple of years ago, the Daytona 500 had a delay that pushed the race until Monday. This past year, they had a delay with weather that forced the race to be moved to later in the evening, and it was thought after the Monday move a couple years back that would maybe be protocol because that Monday broadcast ended up being such a hit. Well, they didn't do that Sunday, mostly because of all the people who fly into Daytona to watch that race, hotel accommodations, flights out on Monday. They want to try to race it on Sunday, which I think is the right way to go, even though viewership for NASCAR's premier race was up the year that they decided to do it on a Monday. It's another piece by Brett A. Summers talking about this technology called Air Titan and how NASCAR is using that to control Mother Nature. Here's Brett once again.
I grew up in a household where the NASCAR race was on almost every Sunday, and a lot of times I would be patiently waiting for my dad to fall asleep so I could switch it to the NBA or something like that. But that's not to say I don't enjoy NASCAR. I've been to quite a few races, and some of the technology that they put out on the track is extremely impressive. And at least for today, I'm not even talking about the race cars on the track. I'm talking about something called Air Titan, which is a technology that NASCAR has recently put into use in about the last year or so. It's a new track drying system. If you've watched NASCAR races, you've probably seen their jet dryers after a rain shower or something going around with the big tanks on the back of trucks, trying to get the moisture off the track and dry the track. And, if this Air Titan thing works out the way they think they're going to, those jet dryers will kind of be going by the wayside. This last week, I wrote about that technology, and it's kind of cool. This Air Titan hooks up behind the back of a vehicle, a pickup in a lot of cases, and it's sort of a network of individual units that work together as it goes over the track, and these dryers blow hot compressed air onto the surface of the track to direct water away from the surface and then dry it. And especially in the past, jet dryers would have to make continuous laps around the track over and over and over again. And in the research that I've done, NASCAR is thinking that this Air Titan could dry the track 80% quicker than those jet dryers, and possibly, if you have enough going side by side at once, could do it in one pass around the track depending on the amount of moisture, which is pretty cool. And with the success NASCAR has found with this, it sounds like other sports are sort of starting to take notice, and I try to think of other sports that might be interested in the technology, and was kind of challenged with more to come up with than just tennis, especially on their hard courts. But this is a big money maker for tennis if they adopt this technology for NASCAR, because when you've got a grandstand full of people who paid money to get in to come watch the event and ultimately get sent home because the playing surface isn't good enough, or the racetrack isn't good enough to be used to finish the event. You've got angry people to deal with, and you've just got the disappointment in being unable to determine a winner. In the case of a NASCAR race, you could have X number of laps left, and you might just have to call the race because the weather's not cooperating. Now, if it continues to rain for a really long time, you might have no choice but to call it. But at least the Air Titan technology will give NASCAR and perhaps other sports the opportunity to get rid of the moisture on the playing surfaces and restart those engines. For First Down Line, I'm Brett A. Summers. Follow me on Twitter at BA Sportswriter.
All right, thanks again, Brett, and you can read more of those stories at FirstDownLine.com. Email us anything you want to share, your thoughts on the podcast, on the website as well, FDL at FirstDownLine.com. Also on Twitter, at FirstDownLine. We share out other stories, too, that don't necessarily come from Brett or Sean or Travis or myself, so be sure to check that out as well. Twitter.com/FirstDownLine. I want to share some things in our download segment coming up, talking about the Major League Baseball app, Bad App, and an app called Jack Threads, which is about clothing. I don't know what you might think that has to do with technology, but I'll share with you that in a moment. First, let's get to the gadgets.
FirstDownLine.com. Gadgets.
I had an opportunity to acquire a Windows 8 tablet recently. I had missed my iPad. My last job that I had supplied me with an iPad. Honestly, one of the bittersweet things for quitting that job that I had to give back because, gosh, really love that thing, and I love the job for what it's worth. But the point is, I had an iPad, and last baseball season, I'd go out on the porch and I'd watch games on my iPad while sitting outside. It was a fantastic deal. Unfortunately, once I gave that back, that left, and plus it was a second screen. So being able to watch games on a second screen, say you have, especially as good as the NHL and NBA playoffs have been, you have one game up on your big TV, well, can you have a side TV? And I was not really loving the iPhone. So I have a Windows 8 tablet now, and I'm using it, and I'll tell you that the smoothness of the Windows 8 tablet, this is a Samsung ATIV, or might be pronounced ATIV, is not nearly what an iPad is. More system crashes and things like that. However, it is one of those tablets that's a full-blown Windows 8 PC. So, comes with a keyboard dock that I can use on the base of it if I so desire. Has Bluetooth built into it, so instead of using the dock, I put it in a case, and then I have a separate Bluetooth keyboard that I use. But there are some really cool features when it's working right that I like. It seems to get overwhelmed quite a bit, which is unfortunate. However, do like in here how there's a split screen. So, right now, this is an example of Major League Baseball's MLB.TV app, along with watching the Watch ESPN app on the left side there. You can see two games at once on a split screen. Plus, it's nice when you're bouncing from one thing to another. I do like the multifunctioning capability that the iPad never had. It doesn't work great with the NBC Sports app. NBC, please fix that app, because the Live Extra app keeps crashing on the Windows 8 tablet. I'm missing so much hockey. I'm not loving it at all. Other than that, the split screen is a really huge asset to sports fans. So if you want to work on something on the desktop here, your word processing, you have, about 2/3 of the screen word processing. And this final third works as the game, which I thought was pretty cool. Speaking of coolness, let's check out some downloads.
FirstDownLine.com. Downloads.
All right, we're going to start off downloads. Major League Baseball's MLB app, the App Bad app, had an update this past week. And in the description of the update, it said, expanded instant replay access to every instant replay video clip and review explanation via the game day portion of the app. And so I thought that was pretty cool because I thought it was brand new, and it turns out that that's not the case. This has actually been around since the app got released this year. However, with that said, it is pretty neat because any of the highlights have the little review piece right here. I guess you can't focus in on it, but it's a little word that says review on top of the highlight. And so from there, you're able to know which particular replays were that occurred in each of the games. So you're able to see those, and it gives explanation, and according to the app description, it gives every decisive instant replay video clip and review explanation. So if you're wondering, well, how on earth did that get overturned or whatever the case may be, it'll give you that explanation. I did promise you that I'd show you the CINet interface for the wireless audio distribution. This is not attached to anything, so it's giving you this weight, but you have the buttons up here and down here that allow you to change the channel, and then you have a volume slider that you can use down here. Again, this is the iPhone version, but that's pretty cool. So your headphones go into the top, and then you're able to listen to the game in your sports bar of choice without having to, worry about having to listen to a game that you just really don't particularly care for. Other than that, the last one I want to show you is something called Jack Threads, which is an app that talks about clothing and other stuff for dudes, which may not even be their official tagline. I have this because they have different deals for clothing, and I am not one of those dudes who's putting on a ton of really expensive clothing. So anything that's on sale, anything that you can get that's ordinarily like $1 bajillion, you can get it for pretty cheap, I think is pretty cool. And the Jack Threads app not only has stuff that might be interesting to you if you do like clothing, but they even include different things like baseball caps. This is an LA Dodgers cap in kind of a denim style. And they sell a lot of these things for cheap. So there's a Cali Bear, which I guess is not necessarily University of Cal, but Atlanta Braves, etc. So I know that's not focusing in great, but you get the point. There you go. Those are some of your downloads, and that is the podcast, episode 2. Since Travis wasn't able to join us this week, we're not going to do a top 5 this week. We would love top 5 suggestions. Feel free to hit us up, firstdownline.com, FDL at firstdownline.com, and you can also check us out on Twitter, twitter.com/firstdownline. One last thing, if you're ever looking for someone to do some awesome stuff for you when it comes to the big voice of the world, check out voiceofbob.com. He's the guy who does all of our imaging, so big thanks to voiceofbob.com. Big thanks to you for paying attention to us, and big thanks to everyone who's read the blog so far, has watched or listened to the podcast, and of course, everyone who's making cool sports and technology out there for sports fans. And we'd like to thank everyone who's been on our website, some of the YouTube videos we've shared so far as well. Until a couple of weeks from now, thanks for tuning in. The FirstDownline.com podcast, and you can find us, of course, on FirstDownline.com.
That's it for the FirstDownline.com podcast. Check out more at our webpage at FirstDownline.com.